So this is a crossover. Chapter 4, Negotiations. As Lemmy and Celestia sat waiting in Mr. Old's office, several sharks swam around in a tank by the door. Suddenly the door opened, and a middle-aged man strode in. His hair was a graying-brown, and he wore a black business suit with a red tie. He ignored Lemmy and looked straight at Celestia as he spoke. "Good evening, Princess. What happenstance has caused your appearance at this time?" The princess replied with a neutral expression. "Mr. Old, I have come here tonight because you finally committed a crime that I'm afraid I cannot forgive you for." An air of sorrow swept over her face as she gestured to Lemmy with her left forehoof. "You kidnapped a child." Celestia took on a pleading tone as she said, "Please, release him and apologize. Promise to never do this again, and your punishment will be shorter and easier. I don't want any more suffering to come of this than necessary." Mr. Old walked past the princess to his desk, where he sat down on an antique cushioned armchair. He rested his hands on the desk and replied in a respectful tone. "If I am to apologize," he said, "I would like to receive an apology in return from the child, for he has wasted valuable resources that this laboratory cannot afford to replace." Celestia stood up, bringing herself to eye level with Mr. Old. "If I might ask, what exactly are these resources? I have been with him since he arrived, and he hasn't done anything wrong." With a smirk, Mr. Old said, "Has he been breathing our air? What about those 2 spellbots who had to be taken out of regularly scheduled guard duties to escort you both here? We had to rely on our reserve models for other duties that these 2 were unable to perform. Also, they will have to be recharged." He straightened in the chair so that he was just above the princess's glaring eyes. "Every action in these labs can lead to unexpected consequences, and because they are so heavily controlled an environment, resources are measured quite extensively." The princess turned around to look at the spellbots guarding the door. As her horn took on a yellow aura, Mr. Old leaned back in his chair. Lemmy thought he almost looked scared. Looking back to Celestia, he saw her aim directly at one of the robots, hitting it with a beam of yellow energy. She then quickly turned and did the same to the other one. She then turned around to Mr. Old. In unison, both robots said, "Battery reserves full. Recharging process complete." With a small smile, Celestia asked Mr. Old if he was satisfied that the resources had been returned. Mr. Old sighed and confirmed that he was. "Now then, I will most certainly release this juvenile delinquent, and I heartily apologize to him for any inconvenience caused." This he said without even looking at Lemmy once. Since he wasn't paying attention to him, Lemmy gave Mr. Old a glare full of daggers. This did not go unnoticed by the princess, who admonished him with a glare of her own, before turning back to Mr. Old. "It seems to me that you still bear some ill will towards Lemmy. He is not a delinquent, and even when apologizing you avoided eye contact. Still, an apology is an apology, so I will not punish you as severely. Instead of a month, I think 2 weeks would be good enough to teach you a lesson you'll never forget." Mr. Old showed unusual agility for a man his age, and jumped behind his ornate armchair as the princess closed her eyes, and her horn began to glow again. This time, however, it was a purple glow that was strangely sinister. She opened her eyes, and they were completely green. Lemmy covered his eyes with his hands. "Please, don't send me to your world. I would rather wear a beggar's garb and solicit food with a cardboard sign than live in your candy-colored paradise. I would sooner sell my whole house and become a monk. I would—" Mr. Old didn't finish his last sentence, as he was sucked into a rainbow portal, which disappeared without a sound. "Now then," Celestia said cheerfully, "let's leave this place, and you can show me where your house is." Lemmy blinked, then nodded frantically. "Okay. So, what to say about this? I mean, I don't know. So Mr. Old likes money. Um, so for him, he's like, I would rather not have any money. That's like his ultimate. Well, I guess he doesn't like it that much. Never mind. He's like, I would rather do any of these other things than be a pony. So he really doesn't like um, going to Equestria. He's like, come on, this is way too idyllic and not capitalistic enough for me. I can't deal with it. I don't like it. Um, so like, yeah, I don't know. He's kind of a bad guy, isn't he? Like, he's sort of not good. I don't know. And I formatted the story so that he's a point of view character for like at least some of it. I seem to have noticed that was a mistake because I think I mean, eventually I sort of stopped writing as many chapters from his perspective and I just started doing other stuff in the same general area. The story seems to sort of suffer from a lack of focus. Like, we get a bunch of characters and they're all spread across the universe, all sort of doing their own thing, which is not very crossover-y. Like, crossovers are supposed to be everybody's all together and they're all sort of showing off their unique traits and how they work together. But I guess Infinity War had all the characters split off into little groups and all do their own little thing. So, and that's a crossover event. In terms of the writing, like, yeah, I mean, some of these sentences, they don't scan properly. Some of them are too long. Some of them don't have commas. I used a semicolon somewhere, I think, which was kind of heinous. I don't know, maybe not. Yeah, like, the overall writing is not actually that much better. We've got descriptions, which is good. It's good to know what Mr. Old looks like. He's wearing a business suit. He's a businessman. Like, yeah, I don't know. And the spell bots, like, Celestia clearly knows what the robots are, and later in the story, she sort of pretends like she doesn't know. I guess that's what I'm gonna go with. I'm gonna go with she pretends that she doesn't know, and not that I forgot this part of the story when I wrote that scene. Let's just keep going. Let's just keep trucking. We're gonna see if we can get chapter 5 done too. Sorry about I'm actually gonna apologize for sneezing. Never mind.